Welcome to the Ministry Mix podcast, where we're bringing you, we're bringing you. We're bringing you conversations for your tools and strategies of ministry leaders. The objectively the best podcast ever. Welcome to the Ministry Mix podcast, where we're bringing you real conversations for the souls and strategies of ministry leaders. My name is Phil Gifford, and I'm joined by my over-caffeinated co-host, Richard Pope.
Hello.
Whether you're a seasoned pastor or ministry leader or just stepping into leadership for the first time, we're here to share stories, insights, practical advice to help you lead strategically while caring for your soul. In each episode, we'll dive into topics that matter for your mission, your calling, and your own personal growth. Today, we have kind of a heavy topic to jump right into, but a needed topic. We want to talk about the experience of loss when it comes to people who have influenced and mentored you in ministry, like what that does to you as a ministry leader. Because chances are, when you started out in ministry or different seasons of ministry, there have been voices and people who brought advice, life, were just strategic in your development. What happens when they're gone?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I would be scared of a pastor or ministry leader who can't name anyone who ever mentored or discipled them.
I agree.
Like, this is a necessary reality. I think not just for, learning skills and habits and tips and tricks of the trade, so to speak. This isn't just like a plumber's apprenticeship, man. This is also like God calls us into relationship. And I'd say specifically relationships that build each other up and develop each other towards their God-given purposes. And I think, which I think is why losing a mentor, and we'll share, practical ways that it's affected us. But I think it's why losing a mentor has such a harsh, I think at times, effect on especially a young ministry leader. Yeah.
Before we get there, I do want to you can just highlight for a second what you said. It's a huge red flag to me when you have people who want to step into ministry leadership and have not either submitted themselves to people to speak into their lives or have nobody that's speaking into their lives. Yeah. That's just super dangerous.
H.B. Charles Jr., who one time stole my Instagram post from my sermon notes. I'm still mad about it. Love you, H.B.
He probably didn't, but somebody on his team...
I would accept one signed copy of On Preaching as reparations for this moment. I love H.B. Charles Jr. Man, we use his book On Preaching in our pastoral training program at Canvas. But he has this quote. He says, "The desire to preach without a desire to study is a desire to perform." And I think in terms of ministry, a desire to lead without a desire to receive is a desire to command or have power. I think it reveals unhealth that you want to pour into others without ever receiving. Yeah. Listen, I'm not trying to be overly charismatic here. The biblical precedent is that people who have the Holy Spirit kind of cultivate and I would say help mature the believer. I really think that when we disciple a younger believer or train a younger believer or a younger leader in the Christian faith, man, we're working and partnering with the Holy Spirit inside of them to help cultivate health and ministry. So let's do this. What happens when someone who helped cultivate you towards health, especially soul health, falls from ministry? Right.
Well, and not just fall, but is gone. Because that's So we're actually referring to a season actually where there was a season a couple years ago in my own life where two strategic people that helped me. I wouldn't call them mentors, I say, because we were already kind of started and doing our things, but the people that you would call if you had a question, the people that you just knew had the answers, had the experience, had the influence, people that you just loved and walked the journey. One died in a tragic accident, just all of a sudden died. And then a month later, another one fell into mortal sin. Yeah. And even in that season too, that season also, I think I had a grandparent die within that same month. So within a month and a half, kind of three people in my life passed away or fell from ministry. So it just kind of was it was a hard hitting season. Yeah. And I wasn't even that super close relationally, but it was still there was a void that you knew, hey, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that, or I need help with this, or I'm thinking through this. Yeah. One phone call, one text away was this voice of influence and this help, but then all of a sudden it was gone. Right. So that's kind of what this is talking about is what do you do when your mentors are gone?
Yeah. Yeah. So we have 3 things that we're going to share. The first one is that their absence reveals how dependent you were. Mm-hmm. And Phil, you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah. And I think this can be both healthy and unhealthy because there is a tendency to wrap up our identity in the people that lead us or we look to. We follow this person on, and even if it's from a distance, this can happen. Like you put all of your stock in like a John Piper figure or a John MacArthur figure or some of these kind of patriarchal theologians and pastors that you look to. And we can get to this point where we have this unhealthy elevation of human vessels and instruments beyond what was even their God-given role. So I think there can be a dependency that is unhealthy with mentors in our lives.
Yeah. There's this like phrase in basketball, Mount Rushmore, the presidents, heads. There's this like question in basketball, who's your Mount Rushmore? So people will list off like Jordan, Kobe, Curry, LeBron, Wilt, Bill Russell. I'm a huge basketball fan. I feel like we've talked about that like 10 times.
I don't think we have that much.
I feel like I say it though.
Okay.
I have lots of basketball references, but something. So I got asked in a leadership training in October in this cohort I'm in for young pastors from around the country is who's your Mount Rushmore of pastors? And then they went to a Psalm, I think Psalm 46, where it talks about God making the mountains melt. And the question was, if God melted your mountain, if God melted your Mount Rushmore, if those leaders who poured into you, if those pastors who cultivated you, if they were gone, would you still be faithful and would you still be in ministry?
Right.
And that question for me, like from a soul level, I was like, whoa, because there's the God who makes the mountains melt. And I'm like God in his sovereignty sometimes, like the one brother who passed away tragically, like God's sovereign. And that happened. God's not surprised. And even a situation where someone falls into moral failure or is disqualified or just quits. I mean, pastors burn out and quit all the time. Right. Man, like if they weren't there, would you still do what you were called to do? But what I think that this reveals is that for some of us, our ministry is more about working with or serving with, or, like I think a lot of young leaders, and I don't think this is bad. I think a lot of us, I mean, this was my own story. I was all in because I love my pastor and want to help accomplish his vision when I was 19 years old. But when I wasn't at that church anymore, was I still into ministry? So if a mentor goes away, do you go away?
Right.
If the mountain melts, if Mount Rushmore, if those people that you look up to, if they're gone, do you still follow through?
We had in Bible college, my undergrad, we're doing a class. I was doing a class on Joshua and Judges, and the professor, I think it was Harvey Hartman was his name, was talking in Joshua chapter 1, where you're transitioning from Moses to Joshua, and Joshua's like kind of freaking out about it. He talked about the transition from Moses, and he said a phrase that has literally stuck with me my entire ministry. He said, "Everybody is valuable in the mission of God, but nobody's indispensable." And that stuck with me because like as a pastor, I can be valuable. People in my church are valuable, but nobody is indispensable.
Yeah.
So like the mission of God goes forward, people move on. And so I think it can reveal the health or unhealth of dependency. I use a healthy, like it's okay to have them in your life and want to turn to them for advice. And like, if they were coaching you and mentoring you and like putting value into, there is a level of hopefully healthy, maybe dependency is not the right word, but valuable contribution.
Sure.
But if it's pivoted or if it's transitioned to that unhealthy in the mountains gone idea. So their absence reveals the level of intertwinedness you had that they may have turned into an idol, not a mentor.
Right. And it might be a healthy thing, but at some point it's like the bird has to leave the nest.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes losing a mentor, losing that teaching, or even sometimes an authoritative figure, depending on, the situation, I think that can actually allow you the freedom, not in like a, you don't ever need mentor way, but like it can give you the room to actually grow also.
Right. Yeah. I think that's sometimes you now have to be the mentor. You have to be the one to look things, or you need other voices in your life. But the third way, I think we can pivot there, right? Or the second way now. We're only one way in. Yeah. The second way. I think that their loss can affect us both for the better and the worse. And that kind of piggybacks off what you were saying, right?
Right.
Like when you lose that anchor person, the void is there that either you can step into or others will step in. So their loss can affect us for the better or the worse. When you wrote that, what were you thinking?
I was writing that I think that when you lose a mentor, when you lose a figure in your life who is leading you, overseeing you, supporting you. I think of that verse in Philippians, follow me as I follow the Lord, right? Like there's this precedent that you're following someone and growing in faithfulness. Man, when that person's gone, kind of like what we just said, but in a little bit of a different lane, you are probably going to be affected by it. I found these statistics earlier. It says 14% of pastors admitted to an affair, and an additional 18% admitted to an emotional affair. Mm-hmm. This is like a real thing that's happening in the church. Is ministries, pastors, and ministry leaders in general get disqualified in those situations. For me, I find it can be hard not to become cynical, skeptical of relationship, which I don't think is healthy. I think God calls us in a relationship. On the flip side, man, at the same time, losing that, let's say a mentor or a figure, to something like an affair, I think what that can actually do might be positive. Mm-hmm. It might drive you to healthier habits, healthier boundaries, healthier rhythms.
It's a shock to your system because you think, oh, this will never happen to me. This will never happen to people. Like this happens on the internet. It's a blown up.
In Ecclesiastes, we just preached through it at Canvas. The recurring theme is, my interpretation, Solomon, older, is looking back at his life and he kind of is walking through all the things he pursued. And then, of course, it ends, chapter 9 and 10 is death awaits all of us. Chapter 11, don't worship your youthfulness because it's going to go away. Chapter 12, you're going to die again. He just reminds you. And then the end is the end of it all, fear the Lord and keep his commandments. I think with Solomon, like we look at the story of his life and his, kingship, and then you look at Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, I think in a lot of ways, Solomon is teaching from a place of unhealth that he's repented of.
Right.
And I think likewise, wisdom literature, I remember hearing this in a book, reading this in a book on wisdom literature. It says the goal of wisdom literature is to grab you by the hair and make you look at something you already know. Like Ecclesiastes, it's a sucker punch. It's like, for me, losing a mentor to immorality, which has happened a couple times since I've been a pastor, honestly, which has been like hurtful. It's every time I'm like, how did this happen? Like, I'm like surprised again, but it's been like that sucker punch. I'm like, okay, how am I doing at boundaries? How am I doing at guarding my heart? How am I doing at time with Jesus? Where in my life, if the devil is going to get me, would he take me out? Right. So I think that's a beneficial thing. Same with losing people when they pass away. Like, the negative can be, man, like why even make friendships? Because it's hard in ministry to make friends, I think. We have an episode on that.
Yeah.
But on the positive side, man, I need to be more intentional in my relationships because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
I just think that whenever
there's an urgency or a more pressing priority.
In either direction, maybe, right? Bad or good. And I think that's every time we have a major change in life. And I think losing an important person in our life is always going to kind of bring these things out.
Well, to me, that season for me, what made it so impactful and telling and in some ways disorienting, but one of the impacts was you had this funeral service for the one who tragically passed away, who had a legacy of planting churches, of mentors, and you had probably 3,000 people at this funeral. It was packed, and church planters from all over the world, like great grandparent church plants that had been planted through this guy's ministries. Right. And literally during the funeral service, like just person after person were talking through how their influence was. And then there were people called to plant churches in the funeral service.
Yeah.
Like such a celebration of a faithful life, a tragic moment, but like, it was literally like one of the best missionary services I've been to. Like it would have called you to be a missionary. Right. So like there was just this legacy and this long lasting, impact. And then on the flip side, a month later, you have this pastor who kind of out of nowhere kind of dropped the moral failing on the people he was leading, and just kind of disappeared. And it really, the two together were a stark picture of how do you want to end your ministry?
Right.
Like, and what are you doing now? One was this like, man, I feel more encouraged on missions. I feel more passionate on missions. I walked away going, I want this to be how my chapter closes.
Yeah. Versus,
deleting Facebook accounts and like stopping everything and like disappearing, right?
Suing people who write articles.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are a lot, and this is not just my personal example. There are a lot of examples right now of pastors who have failed or who are just really ending the chapter of their ministry poorly.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think it affected me for the better in the sense that it made me really look at my own life choices, my habits, my legacy, my long-term faithfulness plan. And for the worst, I will say that I think there was an odd sort of grief that hit.
Right.
Because they're close to you, but they're not like close to you. So it's like this weird, it's this hard to describe sense of loss that's not very tangible, but it probably took me about 3 months to 6 months to kind of had this funk in the background of my leadership. So affects us for the worst or the best. Yeah. And I think there's hurt too. Like you feel a little bit betrayed. You feel a little bit, there's lots of ways it affects you. So how do you move forward from health? I mean, let me throw that out to you. How would you suggest, in the good or the bad, how would you move forward in that sort of loss?
Yeah, I think you got to kind of reorient yourself. You don't serve man. Ultimately, you serve the Lord. I think this is why it's important to have a personal sense of calling that's not just tied to people. But then also, really leaning into, that season as an intentional time to grow as a leader, which is our third point. You have an opportunity to grow more into your own leadership. So, when you lose a mentor, that isn't, regardless of how negative, positive, they could be 89 and go to glory, like on a cloud, or they could be 40 and, fall into sin. When you do lose that mentor, lose that leader, I think that actually gives you an opportunity, Phil, to grow into your own leadership, to learn from that, but to become more yourself. I think a lot of us, at least me, when they talk about preaching, they say it takes time for you to, it takes time to find your own voice.
Right.
And I think we recognize that with preaching. I don't think we recognize that as well with other areas of ministry. So the other day, our kids pastor, David, who, we play Fortnite with, David was,
you only get mentioned on this podcast. We play Fortnite with you, right?
Yeah. If we don't play Fortnite, you're not on this podcast. Sorry guys. But no, David, he came in and he said he wanted to meet with me and Keith and our director of ministries. And, he was just proposing a new kids ministry model, kids ministry curriculum. I mean, he's done a lot of work. But in his proposal to us, he used 20 Richardisms. And I've been discipling David since he was 16. So I met him when he was a youth group kid. I was serving in that youth group as a leader. And then I left. He left with me. He helped me plant a church. Now he's our kids pastor. Almost 10 years later. But so in 10 years, he's picked up a lot of Richardisms. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm consistently trying to do and be aware of is David doesn't need to be me. So I'm like, hey, David, what do you think about this? And I think no matter how much a leader intentionally does that, there's something about having a void above you that helps you to grow up. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, it's like the man of the house is gone. You gotta be the man now.
Well, yeah, it's like generation. I wrote down in my notes when we were thinking about this, like a generational transition takes place.
Yeah.
When the people who you looked to, who were ahead of you, who were either thought wise ahead of you or experience wise ahead of you or just impact wise ahead of you, when they're gone now, everyone else you're looking across. Cause that was the thing is I looked across and I'm like, and again, there are people who can do things better than me. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm an expert, but I'm like, when I look at the influences of my life now, it's peer to peer, not mentor to, it's not as much mentor to disciple, if you will.
Yeah.
No, so that changes how you do stuff.
Right. Right.
And so you're having a conversation on a horizontal level now going, hey, how do you guys do this? I want to try to learn from that.
Right.
Versus what would you do if you were me sort of thing, which I mean, if you're a healthy leader, you're asking those questions of people that are below you. They don't have to be a position ahead of you, but hopefully you're taking influence from people on every, 360 perspective from you. You can learn from David, even though you've mentored him since you were 16. I can learn from people in our ministry who are new, but that generational transition, it's tricky. We, speaking of loss, we just had both Pam and I, our last living grandparent passed away, last month. So we've seen that general transition where grandparents are gone that we had, and now our parents are the last living generation. Right. And, that's a weird thought because it always feels like it's less removed now because you're like, okay, my parents are the next generation and then we're the next generation after that. So I think it's time you have an opportunity to be more of those mentors, I think.
I was thinking of this verse. I'm pulling it up right now. By the way, we don't edit these, so this awkward moment while I pull it up is
part of the podcast.
Yeah.
We did also edit some. We do edit some things out. We more start over than we edit.
The 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. Obviously, that verse is applying to something other than this, but I do think one of the things that the Lord will use in your life to help you grow into maturity, both in your relationship with God and your personal like leadership, whether it be in ministry or, man, if you're just a parent listening to this, like even if you're just a mom or dad, I think that moment when you can't call your mom or dad anymore to ask for help with your kids or advice is where God's going to use that to help you grow into maturity. I do believe that. I think part of how God sanctifies us, grows us, and matures us is through loss, which I think is a biblical theme, right? I think about all, the Old Testament. It's like Israel turns away, loss. We need God. We're back with God. So I think one thing I would add to all this is don't let this be a cyclical thing. Like when you lose a leader, it's okay if it devastates you. Yes. It's not okay if it destroys you. And I think that's the balance, right? Like don't idolize to the point that when you lose it, because I made that mistake in that season, man. There was a couple months where I was like, why do I even do this anymore? Because I tied so much of my identity to this one particular mentor who, if I had a Mount Rushmore church planting, would have been on it.
Yeah. Well, he helped you articulate your call, helped you do all these sorts of things. Like
2 years before I launched, we were meeting.
Like you have those people that like they speak life into you in such a way that your life is different.
Yeah.
And it just hits hard, and it's okay to grieve. It's okay to have that. It's okay to have that devastate you, like, and have to ask questions. It's not okay to stop and be done.
Yeah.
Like God's bigger than that mentor.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good quote or a verse to look at. I think there is this sense where we can use our mentors to limit our own influence and responsibility. Like we use it as a safety blanket. Like, you know what you need to do in your church. You don't have to call your mentor to say that. Like pray about it, seek God, read some books, get some wisdom. I'm not saying that we should not have mentors, but at some point we can use them almost as a safety blanket or this filter that we may not need. And it actually is limiting our leadership at a stage. So, if you were speaking to somebody listening to this podcast who was thinking about their own life and their own mentors, where do you find good mentors? I know this is kind of a side thought, but like, I feel like we should at least dip into that before we hang up on this call.
Yeah, it's probably a positive way to end it too. I think one way, I heard this years ago, find someone who does what you want to do and ask them to teach you. And, mentorship doesn't always have to be purely relational. There can be like, training and coaching. And I think also just understanding mentor is a broad term. Yeah. I'm sure someone smarter than me has like outlined it better, but I've had mentors who were like coaches. I've had mentors who were like big brothers. I've had mentors who were almost like, spiritual uncles or fathers. Yeah. I've also had mentors who were just really good at something that I wanted to be good at.
So I think I like to use the word influences more than mentors sometimes, because like to me, a mentor is somebody that like literally walks with you. Like you're in, I guess like you and David, I think that would be more of a mentorship where like you've known him for decades now. Yeah. You've seen him grow up, and he's an influencer people that like, oh, I've read all that person's book. I've listened to their podcast, or I've had coffee with them once a month. Like, and,
I think being open and having open eyes. Like I'm sure there's like ways to go hunt them down, but I have never hunted down a mentor or influence or any of those things that's actually been beneficial. Right. They've almost always happened semi-organically. Right. The reason I say semi is, you meet someone, you start talking to them and you're like, I want more of this. Like there's a guy up in Boston who is doing a really cool ministry. Their church meets in a mall. And I was just like, dude, like I want you to teach me how he's done a really good job of creating a culture in his church that is like addictive. Like, and I mean that in the best way. People want people want to go to church there. Yes.
I've been to that church and it's totally true.
Yeah. And I want that, man. And I think we're on the precipice of that. So I was like, dude, like we know each other from a cohort. We're both in that cohort I talked about earlier. I was like if I like fly up there a few times a year and just like spend a night, would you just teach me? Yeah. And he said, yeah. And like, it was organic, but then I was like, I like what I see. And I'm like, teach me. And he said, yes. So.
Yeah. So I think mentorship can fall into different lanes. Like we've talked about losing two mentors that were related to church planting. Sure. But like you might have mentors who, as a parent, as a husband, as a Christian, in different lanes, and for outreach, for discipleship, like people you turn to in different lanes. I guess the thing I would say to either wrap us up or to pivot to the next thought you have, is we have to be teachable and we have to open our lives to influences. And sometimes that does come with hurt and loss, but it's worth 100%. It. But it's worth it.
I want to end with this quote from Francis Chan.
I love it.
Francis Chan said, "Our culture is all about shallow relationships, but that doesn't mean we should stop looking each other in the eye and having deep conversations." I think that is in large part what mentorship is, deep conversations towards a goal. And when you lose mentors or influences, it's easy to be cynical, but don't become so cynical that you miss out on relationship.
That's good. Yeah. Don't close yourself off.
Yeah, don't shut the door.
Yep. Well, hopefully people in your life are speaking into your life, and there'll be a time when they may go away for one reason or the other, but keep serving the Lord, keep leading, and keep putting yourself out there. So thanks for listening to this episode of the Ministry Mix podcast. We hope this episode has been helpful to you for your ministry and for your own spiritual growth. If you have some questions or some ideas for us to share, please leave us some feedback. We'd love for it if you would review this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast or find this podcast. Your review helps this get before leaders just like you who are looking for these conversations. Connect with us on social media. Let us know what conversation you want to hear next. But until next time, keep leading with purpose while caring for your soul.